Admiral Seven stood at the command deck of the Celestial Prominence, his crystalline flagship gleaming as it led the Jacquerie fleet into the Sol system. His four eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of satisfaction as he observed the holographic display of their target. Earth, third planet from its sun, home to a civilization that had barely reached its space age. Long-range scans complete, Admiral, First Observer Callan announced, her fins rippling with confusion. But there seems to be an anomaly. Seven glided across the polished floor, his ceremonial robes trailing behind him. Explain. The orbital space around the target planet, it's cluttered. Thousands of artificial objects, most seemingly without purpose. Callan manipulated the hologram, zooming in on Earth's orbit, the display filled with countless dots, each representing a human-made object. A defense grid, Seven suggested, though something about the pattern seemed wrong. Defense grids were orderly, purposeful. This was chaotic. Negative, Admiral. Most objects appear to be defunct satellites, discarded rocket stages, and fragments of destroyed equipment. They're simply debris. The bridge fell silent. In all their conquests across 17 star systems, the Jacquerie had never encountered a species that would intentionally clutter their own orbital space. Space was sacred, meant to be kept pristine and orderly. Bring us closer, Seven ordered, his voice steady despite his growing unease. Maintain standard approach formation. The Jacquerie fleet moved forward, their ships arranging themselves in the perfect geometric patterns that had intimidated countless civilizations. Yet as they drew nearer to Earth, their formation had to constantly adjust, avoiding the fields of debris that threatened their carefully maintained order. Admiral, Tactical Officer Revis called out, "These humans, they launch objects into space with minimal shielding. They accept a significant failure rate. They leave their failed experiments in orbit." Seven watched as the hologram displayed a human rocket launch from the planet's surface. The primitive chemical propulsion was expected, but the casualness of it all was disturbing. The humans celebrated even partial successes, learning from their failures rather than hiding them. "Show me their space stations," he commanded. The display shifted to show the International Space Station, a patchwork of modules built by different nations, expanded over decades. It was nothing like the elegant Jacquerie architecture. Yet it had survived in this debris field for years, its crew constantly performing repairs and improvements. They adapt their designs as they build, Revis noted with a mix of horror and fascination. No final blueprint. They improvise. A small alert chimed, drawing their attention. A piece of debris had just broken apart, creating a cascade of new fragments that their sensors needed to track. The humans called it the Kessler effect, their own term for the chaos they'd created in their orbital space. How'd they navigate through this? Callan wondered aloud, her fins now fully extended in agitation. Their spacecraft must be unpredictable. "Show me their flight paths," Seven ordered. The hologram updated, displaying the trajectories of active human vessels. They didn't follow the elegant, efficient paths that Jacquerie ships used. Instead, they weaved through the debris field like dancers, each path unique, each trajectory calculated to use the chaos to their advantage. Seven felt his scales tighten. The standard intimidation approach would not work here. How do you intimidate a species that treats space itself as an obstacle course to be conquered? "New contact," Callan announced. Small human vessel approaching the debris field. They watched as the human ship deliberately moved into the densest part of the field. Its radar signature became confused with the surrounding debris, effectively hiding it from standard scanning methods. "They're using their own mess as camouflage," Revis whispered. "Ingenious and terrifying." Admiral Seven made a decision. "Adjust our formation, maximum distance between ships. We cannot predict how these humans might use their environment against us." As the Jacquerie fleet spread out, abandoning their perfect geometric patterns for the first time in their military history, Seven realized that this conquest might be unlike any they had attempted before. The humans hadn't just reached for the stars. They had made space itself their ally, turning chaos into an art form that the orderly Jacquerie could barely comprehend. The holographic display aboard the Celestial Prominence erupted in a flurry of activity as the first human response fleet emerged from behind Earth's moon. Admiral Seven watched with growing fascination as the Earth vessels ignored every established rule of space combat formation. They're spreading out in a seemingly random pattern, Tactical Officer Revis reported, his scales shifting to a lighter shade of blue in confusion. Our battle computers cannot establish their strategic intent. The human ships moved like a swarm of insects, each vessel following its own unpredictable trajectory. The Jacquerie's advanced combat algorithms, developed over centuries of warfare, failed to detect any recognizable patterns. Maximum magnification on their lead vessel, Seven ordered, his four eyes narrowing as the image resolved. The human ship was small by Jacquerie standards, barely a quarter the size of their smallest cruiser. Its hull bore scorch marks and patches of different colored metals, signs of multiple repairs and modifications. To the Jacquerie, who prided themselves on the pristine condition of their vessels, it should have been an embarrassment. Instead, it moved with a grace that defied its worn appearance. Admiral. First Observer Callan called out, her fins rippling with urgency. The humans are accelerating directly toward the debris field. Surely they'll adjust course, Revis said. No military force would. His words trailed off as they watched the human fleet split into smaller groups, each choosing a different path through the orbital debris. Some ships used larger pieces of space junk as visual cover, while others skimmed so close to defunct satellites that the Jacquerie crew collectively held their breath. Their pilots must be insane, Callan whispered, but there was a note of admiration in her voice. Seven studied the tactical display, beginning to see something that had eluded him before. No, he said softly. They're dancing. The crew turned to their admiral in confusion. Look at their movement patterns, Seven continued, using his ceremonial staff to trace the paths of several human ships. They're not flying randomly. They're responding to the environment, like dancers responding to music we cannot hear. As if to prove his point, a human vessel suddenly spun on its axis, using its maneuvering thrusters to scatter a cloud of debris toward a Jacquerie scout ship. The scout's sensors, calibrated for detecting energy weapons and missile launches, were momentarily overwhelmed by the shower of small objects. Remarkable, Revis breathed. They're using our expectations against us. Another human ship executed what appeared to be a dangerous tumble, but Seven now recognized it as a deliberate maneuver. The vessel's erratic motion masked the deployment of a small probe, which disappeared into the debris field before their sensors could track it. Admiral, Callan reported, her fins now fully extended in excitement. We're detecting unusual energy readings from multiple human vessels. They appear to be charging their engines. Before Seven could respond, 3 human ships executed a maneuver that would have earned any Jacquerie captain immediate demotion. They turned their engines directly toward the Jacquerie formation and fired their thrusters at full power. The intense light and radiation temporarily blinded the sensitive crystalline sensors of the nearest Jacquerie vessels. Status report. Seven demanded, even as the tactical display struggled to reorient itself. Minor damage to forward sensors, Revis replied. But Admiral, the humans, they're gone. The debris field before them appeared empty. Somehow, in those few moments of sensor disruption, the entire human fleet had vanished among the orbital chaos they called home. Seven felt his scales ripple with an emotion he hadn't experienced in decades, genuine excitement. The humans hadn't just adapted to space warfare, they had transformed it into an art form. Their ships moved like fireflies in the night, each light a deliberate distraction, each pattern meaningful in ways his people had yet to understand. Send word to the High Command, he ordered, his voice carrying a new note of respect. The humans don't just travel through space, they dance with it. Admiral, you need to see this. First Observer Collins' voice carried an unusual tremor as she transmitted the latest intercepted broadcast to the main display of the celestial prominence. Stephen watched as images flickered across the screen. Vast starships soaring through impossible nebula, alien worlds teeming with life, and humans venturing into the unknown reaches of space. But something was different about these transmissions. These are not military records, he noted, his four eyes widening in realization. No, Admiral, Callan confirmed. The humans call this science fiction. They create these stories purely for entertainment. The bridge crew gathered around the display, watching scenes from dozens of human space narratives. Shows about peaceful exploration mixed with tales of grand space battles. Stories of first contact stood alongside epics about humanity spreading across the galaxy. They imagined thousands of possible futures, Revis observed, his tactical display forgotten. Look at how many different ways they picture their own species developing. Stephen studied a particular sequence showing humans making peace with a silicon-based life form. They don't just imagine conquest, they imagine understanding. A new transmission caught their attention, a human show about a small ship's crew facing the unknown together, supporting each other through challenges. The characters weren't perfect warriors or flawless heroes. They were simply people bringing their humanity with them into space. Send this to cultural analysis, Stephen ordered. I want to know what these stories tell us about our opponent. Hours later, as the Jacquerie fleet maintained their cautious distance from Earth, a series of new transmissions began broadcasting from the hidden human ships. The first was a powerful orchestral piece that seemed to capture the majesty of space itself in musical form. This composition, Callan reported, consulting her data screen, is called The Planets by Gustav Holst. It's centuries old, created before humans even reached their moon. More music followed. Some pieces were triumphant and bold, others mysterious and ethereal. Each human ship seemed to choose its own soundtrack, turning their continued game of hide and seek among the debris into a strange concert. They're adding their own harmony to space itself, Stephen mused, finding himself moved by a particularly stirring piece. Even in battle, they create art. A report from Cultural Analysis flashed across his private screen. The findings were fascinating. Humans used their entertainment not just for pleasure, but to explore possibilities, process fears, and imagine solutions to challenges they hadn't even faced yet. Admiral, Revis called out, we're detecting movement in Sector 7. A human ship emerged from behind a defunct satellite, its running lights pulsing in time with the music it broadcast. As they watched, it executed a series of maneuvers that seemed choreographed to the symphony playing across space. Are they dancing with their ship? Colin asked, her fins rippling in wonder. No, Sivan replied, beginning to understand. They're showing us how they see space, not as a void to be conquered, but as a canvas for creation. More human vessels appeared, each moving to its own music, each telling its own story through motion. The Jacquerie fleet, trained to respond to aggression, found themselves audience to an impromptu performance that defied their tactical doctrines. Your orders, Admiral? Revis asked, his tactical systems struggling to categorize this unprecedented display. Stephen watched as the human ships wove patterns through the debris field, their music mixing together in space. He thought of all the stories they had intercepted, all the futures humans had imagined for themselves. We came expecting warriors, he said finally. Instead, we found artists who learned to fight. The difference is crucial. He straightened his ceremonial robes. Send them something in return. Sir, send them our stellar cartography songs, the ones we use to teach our children about the stars. Let's show them that we, too, understand that space is more than a battlefield. As the crystalline harmonies of Jacquerie star songs joined the human symphony in orbit around Earth, Stephen realized that this encounter was becoming something unprecedented in his species' history. A dialogue in the language of art, conducted across the vacuum of space. Impossible, Revis stated, his scales paling as he reviewed the sensor data. No species would willingly operate vessels in such conditions. Admiral Seaven studied the underwater footage that Earth's own broadcasting networks had readily shared with the world. Massive metal vessels gliding silently through the darkest depths of the planet's oceans, carrying crews who lived contentedly beneath crushing pressures that would shatter Jacquerie crystalline hulls. How deep do these submarines travel? Seaven asked, his four eyes fixed on the image of a nuclear submarine surfacing through Arctic ice. Some human vessels routinely operate at depths exceeding 1,000 meters, Callan reported, her fins trembling slightly. Their deepest research vessels have reached the bottom of oceanic trenches, nearly 11 kilometers down. The bridge fell silent. The Jacquerie, whose homeworld had only shallow seas, had never developed significant underwater technology. The very concept of willingly descending into lightless depths seemed alien to them. "Show me their earliest submarines," Seaven commanded, curious about the development of such vessels. The display shifted to grainy historical footage. Primitive underwater boats from centuries past, crafted when humans barely understood the science behind their operation. Yet they had persisted, learning from each failure, improving their designs until they mastered the deep. "Admiral," Callan's voice carried a note of revelation, "I'm detecting similarities between their submarine tactics and their current space maneuvers." The tactical display split, showing a submarine stalking through underwater canyons alongside a recording of yesterday's space engagement. The patterns were strikingly similar. Both vessels used natural features for concealment, moved with deliberate silence, and struck from unexpected angles. They learned warfare in 3 dimensions long before reaching space, Revis observed, his tactical mind beginning to appreciate the implications. While we were learning to fight across flat desert plains, they were mastering combat in an environment that demanded thinking in every direction. New sensor data flashed across the screen. A human vessel was approaching through an asteroid field, using the tumbling rocks for cover, just as their submarines used underwater terrain. The ship's engine signature was minimal, nearly lost in the background radiation. They're treating space like their oceans, Seaven realized. The debris fields are their underwater canyons. The asteroid belts are their seafloors. They already knew how to fight in this environment before they ever left their planet. A sudden alert drew their attention. The human vessel had launched something, not a weapon, but a small, autonomous probe. It moved through the asteroid field with the same careful precision as the deep-sea exploration vehicles they'd observed in Earth's footage. Their experience with remote underwater vehicles, Callan noted, perfectly prepared them for operating probes in space. They'd been practicing for centuries without realizing it. Seaven watched as the human probe navigated the complex gravitational eddies between asteroids, using them to conserve fuel just as underwater vehicles used ocean currents. The skill display was impressive, but more impressive was the realization that humans had developed these techniques in an environment even more challenging than space. "They see space differently than we do," Seaven said softly. "To us, it's a void to be crossed. To them, it's just another ocean, full of currents, hiding places, and unexplored depths." A new transmission from the human vessel reached them, carrying images from Earth's deep-sea exploration missions. Footage of bizarre creatures living near hydrothermal vents, of coral reefs teeming with life, of discoveries that showed how much remained unknown in their own oceans. "They're showing us why they're not afraid of space," Callan realized. They grew up exploring an alien world on their own planet. Everything about their approach to space comes from centuries of learning to survive in the deep. Seaven nodded, understanding finally clicking into place. "We thought we were facing a young spacefaring species, but we were wrong. We're facing master explorers who have simply found a new sea to sail." As if to emphasize his words, more human ships emerged from hiding, moving through space with the confidence of creatures born to the depths. The Jacquerie fleet watched in growing admiration as humanity demonstrated that mastering one hostile environment had perfectly prepared them for another. The tension on the bridge of the celestial prominence could be cut with a ceremonial blade. 3 Jacquerie cruisers had cornered a human vessel near a dense asteroid cluster, a perfect tactical trap by any military standard. "Surrender your vessel." Revis transmitted the standard ultimatum, his scales gleaming with anticipated victory. The response that came back left the entire bridge crew staring at each other in confusion. Actually, the human captain's voice carried an unexpected note of amusement. "I was thinking we could race instead. First one through the asteroid field wins. Loser has to share their best space stories. What do you say?" Admiral Seven moved closer to the communications panel, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence as he processed this unprecedented response to a combat situation. "They can't be serious," Callan whispered, her fins rippling with uncertainty. "Their ship is surrounded." The human captain's image appeared on their view screen, smiling broadly. "Come on, when's the last time you did something just for the fun of it? Those beautiful ships of yours must be capable of some fancy flying." Revis turned to Seven, his tactical display forgotten. "Admiral, I believe they're attempting some form of psychological warfare." "No," Seven replied slowly, studying the human's genuine expression of enthusiasm. "They're being playful." As if to prove his point, the human vessel executed a perfect barrel roll, its running lights creating a spiral pattern in space. The maneuver served no tactical purpose, but it was undeniably elegant. "Look at their crew," Callan noted, zooming in on the human ship's windows. The bridge crew could be seen making excited gestures, some even pressing their faces against the glass to wave at the Jacquerie vessels. A new transmission arrived. Music from Earth, upbeat and energetic. The human ship began moving in time with the rhythm, turning their evasive maneuvers into something that looked remarkably like a dance performance. "Admiral," Revis reported, his voice carrying a note of disbelief, "other human vessels are arriving. They're setting up course markers in the asteroid field." Indeed, small beacons were being deployed, creating a twisting path through the field of tumbling rocks. The humans were actually setting up a race course, complete with checkpoint indicators and navigation guides. "They're turning a combat situation into a sporting event," Seven marveled. "And look, they're marking the most challenging routes with higher point values." More human ships arrived, not to join the fight, but to watch. They positioned themselves at various points along the improvised course, setting up observation posts and broadcasting commentary, as if this were a planned competition. The latest arrival is broadcasting something called popcorn recipes, Callan reported, her confusion evident. "They're treating this like entertainment." Seven felt something shift in his understanding of humanity. Every species they'd encountered treated space combat as a serious formal affair. But humans found joy in it. Not the joy of victory or conquest, but the simple pleasure of testing their skills and sharing the experience with others. "Admiral," Revis said hesitantly, "the human captain is asking if we're ready to start. They've even offered to give us a head start, since we're not familiar with the course." Seven straightened his ceremonial robes and made a decision that would be discussed in Jacquerie military academies for generations to come. Accept their challenge. "Sir." The bridge crew turned to him in shock. "Look at what they've done." Seven gestured at the scene before them. "In less than an hour, they've transformed a potential battle into a celebration of skill and cooperation. They've shown us that space can be more than just a battlefield." As the Jacquerie cruisers moved to the starting positions, their crews beginning to feel an unfamiliar sensation, excitement. Seven realized that humanity's greatest strength might not be their technology or their tactics. It was their ability to find joy in the unknown, to turn challenges into opportunities for connection. "Race starting in 3 minutes," the human captain announced cheerfully. "May the best pilots win." The medical bay of the Celestial Prominence had never hosted a human before. Admiral Seven stood at the observation window, watching with fascination as Dr. Sarah Chen from the Earth vessel Swift Current worked alongside Jacquerie healers to treat casualties from a recent asteroid collision. "Their methods are unorthodox," Chief Healer Mira observed, her healing crystals humming softly. but remarkably effective. Through the window, they watched Dr. Chen demonstrate a portable medical scanner, a device that seemed primitive compared to Jacquerie crystalline diagnostics, yet provided detailed insights that even their advanced technology missed. "Tell me about human medical training," Segan requested, genuinely curious about these practitioners who had volunteered to help after the accident, despite being technical adversaries. "Fascinating system," Admiral Mira's scales shifted to scholarly blue. "Their healers trained for many years, constantly updating their knowledge. They have specialists for every part of their biology, yet all work together seamlessly." On the medical bay floor, Dr. Chen was showing the Jacquerie team how to use Earth-style emergency triage protocols. Her movements were quick but careful, her explanations clear and patient. "They call it first, do no harm," Mira continued. "It's the foundation of their medical philosophy. Every treatment weighs benefits against risks. They protect life above all else." A junior healer rushed in with new scans from the damaged sections of their ship. Dr. Chen immediately noticed something in the data that the Jacquerie had missed, a pattern of stress fractures that could endanger more crew members if not addressed. "Look how they think," Seven mused. "They don't just treat the injury, they prevent the next one." Through another window, they could see human engineering teams working alongside Jacquerie maintenance crews. The humans had brought simple but effective repair techniques that complemented the Jacquerie's more sophisticated technology. "Admiral," Colin's voice came through the communication system, "you need to see the latest transmission from the human medical ships." The display activated, showing a fleet of Earth vessels approaching. They weren't warships, but hospital ships, painted white with clear medical symbols. They had launched as soon as they learned of the accident, bringing additional supplies and expertise. "They help without hesitation," Seven noted, "even though we came as conquerors." "It's more than that," Mira added, her scales rippling with excitement. "Look at their medical database. They're sharing everything. Centuries of medical knowledge, freely given. They want us to learn, to understand." The display showed thousands of medical texts, research papers, and practical guides being transmitted to the Jacquerie fleet. Humanity was offering generations of healing wisdom to the very forces that had threatened their world. "There's something else," Callan reported. "The humans have identified improvements we could make to our life support systems. They've experienced similar challenges in their underwater vessels. They want to help us prevent future accidents." Seven watched as Dr. Chen demonstrated emergency procedures to a group of young Jacquerie healers. She treated their crystalline biology with the same care and respect she would show human patients, adapting Earth techniques to better serve alien physiology. "We came expecting conquests," Seven said softly. "They offered cooperation instead." A small alert sounded, another human vessel requesting permission to dock. This one carried environmental specialists who had experience dealing with crystal-based life forms from Earth's deep-sea vents. "They're not just helping us survive," Admiral Mira observed. "They're helping us thrive. Every solution they offer builds trust between our people." Through the observation window, they watched Dr. Chen share a moment of joy with her Jacquerie colleagues as a particularly challenging treatment succeeded. The barriers of species and culture seemed to vanish in that moment of shared accomplishment. Perhaps Seven mused, his four eyes taking in the scene of cooperation before him. This is their true strength. Not their ability to fight, but their dedication to preserving life. Any life, all life, even at the risk of their own. As if to emphasize his words, another fleet of human medical ships appear on their sensors, bringing more helpers, more knowledge, and more hope for a future where former enemies could work together as healers among the stars. Admiral Seven found himself doing something unprecedented in his long military career, reading human science fiction stories. The tablet before him displayed tales of faster-than-light travel, time dilation, and fantastic technologies that didn't yet exist. "Admiral." Callan interrupted his reading, her fins rippling with excitement. "You need to see this. The humans are attempting something unusual." The main display activated, showing a small human transport vessel approaching a damaged civilian ship near the outer edges of the debris field. The civilian ship, neither human nor Jacari, had suffered severe damage from a micrometeorite impact. "What are they planning?" Steven asked, noting the transport's unusual approach vector. "They're calling it a storybook rescue," Rivas reported, his scales shifting in confusion. "They say they got the idea from an old science fiction novel." The human transport positioned itself carefully, matching velocity with the damaged vessel. Instead of attempting a standard docking procedure, they began deploying a strange network of flexible tubes and magnetic anchors. "It's like something from their entertainment files," Callan observed, bringing up a side-by-side comparison with a scene from a human space opera. "They're recreating fictional technology with real materials." Steven watched as the human crew executed their unconventional rescue plan. The flexible tubes created a safe passage between ships, while the magnetic anchors provided stability. It was improvised, unexpected, and remarkably effective. Their fiction, Steven realized, it's not just entertainment. It's practice. "Sir, look at their stories," Steven gestured to his tablet. "They spend generations imagining solutions to space challenges before they ever face them. When problems arise, they'd already have countless theoretical solutions ready to test." The rescue operation continued, with the human crew adapting their fictional inspiration to real-world physics. They had clearly studied the scene from their entertainment, but had modified it to work within actual space conditions. "Admiral," Rivas called out, "more human ships are arriving. They're sharing their own story-inspired solutions." The tactical display showed multiple human vessels approaching, each bringing different techniques borrowed from their rich history of speculative fiction. Some ideas were practical, others needed modification, but all showed the remarkable human ability to transform imagination into reality. "They're using their entertainment archive as a technical database," Callan noted with amazement. "Each ship is citing different stories as inspiration for their rescue attempts." Steven observed as the humans coordinated their efforts, combining elements from multiple fictional sources to create something entirely new. Their command structure was flexible, allowing them to adapt and incorporate new ideas as they emerged. "Look at their communication patterns," Steven pointed to the data streams. "They're not just sharing technical information, they're sharing stories, comparing fictional scenarios to their current situation, building on each other's cultural knowledge." A particularly elegant solution emerged when one human ship combined the artificial gravity technology from a popular space drama with real-world physics principles. The result was a surprisingly effective method for stabilizing the damaged civilian vessel. "They're not bound by traditional thinking," Rivas observed, his tactical mindset beginning to appreciate the advantages of such creativity. "Every story they've ever told becomes a potential tool in their problem-solving arsenal." The rescue operation succeeded, with the civilian ship's crew safely evacuated through the improvised passage system. The humans immediately began documenting their successful technique, adding real-world data to their collection of stories. "This is why they're so adaptable," Steven said softly. "Their stories aren't just entertainment, they're rehearsals for the future. Every challenge they imagine in fiction becomes a blueprint for solving real problems." As the human ships escorted the rescued civilians to safety, they continued sharing stories and ideas, already discussing how to improve their technique for next time. Their solution would soon become part of their official rescue protocols, turning today's improvisation into tomorrow's standard procedure. They don't just explore space, Callan realized. They dream it into being, one story at a time. The grand chamber of the celestial prominence had been transformed. Where once only Jacari crystalline displays had glowed, now human holograms danced alongside them, creating a mesmerizing blend of both species' technologies. Admiral Steven stood before the assembled representatives of both fleets, his ceremonial robes catching the mixed light. 3 standard weeks ago, he began, his 4 eyes sweeping the gathered audience, We entered this system believing we understood the nature of spacefaring civilizations. We were wrong. The chamber's displays showed highlights from their encounters: human ships dancing through debris fields, the great race through the asteroid belt, medical teams working together, and the story-inspired rescue that had saved so many lives. First observer Colin. Steven gestured to his trusted officer, "Share your final analysis." Colin stepped forward, her fins rippling with scholarly excitement. The humans don't just inhabit space, they embrace it. They bring their music, their stories, their games, and their dreams to the stars. Where we saw a void to be conquered, they saw a canvas for creation. The display shifted to show human children in their schools, looking up at the stars with wonder. Next to these images, footage played of young Jacquerie learning perfectly ordered space combat maneuvers. "We taught our young to master space," Revis added, his tactical displays now showing combined human-Jacquerie flight patterns. They taught their children to love it. Both approaches have merit. Together, they become something extraordinary. A new image appeared, the first successful attempt at combining human adaptability with Jacquerie crystalline technology. The resulting ship was unlike anything either species had created alone, its design incorporating the best aspects of both civilizations. Our mission was to evaluate Earth for potential integration into the Dominion, Steven continued. Instead, we found ourselves being evaluated. The humans tested us, not through combat, but through creativity. They challenged us not to prove their weakness, but to reveal their strength. The chamber filled with recorded moments of cooperation. Human engineers helping optimize Jacquerie crystal matrices, Jacquerie scientists helping refine human navigation systems, both species learning and growing together. "Look at what we've achieved in just 3 weeks," Steven gestured to the displays. "Now imagine what we could accomplish in 3 years or 3 centuries." Chief Healer Mira stepped forward, presenting data from the combined medical initiatives. "We've already developed 37 new treatment protocols by merging our approaches. The humans' innovative thinking complements our structured methods perfectly." The final display showed a map of nearby star systems, but not as a tactical plot. Instead, it was marked with potential joint exploration routes, scientific research stations, and cultural exchange centers. "The Dominion sent us to find new subjects," Steven announced. "Instead, we found new teachers. The humans have shown us that space is not just a battlefield or a resource to be controlled. It's a frontier that becomes richer when we explore it together." He turned to address the human representatives directly. "You've never seen your greatest strength. It's not your technology, your tactics, or even your adaptability. It's your ability to turn strangers into friends, to find wonder in the unknown, and to share that wonder with others." The chamber's lighting shifted, crystalline and holographic technologies working in harmony to create a spectacular display of both species' home stars. Therefore, my final report to the Dominion contains only one recommendation. We should not seek to conquer humanity, but to learn from them. And perhaps, if they're willing, to explore the stars together. The human representative smiled, and one stepped forward with a data crystal. "We took the liberty of drafting some joint mission proposals. There's this fascinating stellar phenomenon in the Horsehead Nebula that we'd love to study together." Steven accepted the crystal, noting how it combines Jacquerie's storage technology with human data protocols. "You've already begun the collaboration, haven't you?" "Of course," the human replied with a grin. "We've got too many stars to explore to waste time with formal procedures. So, what do you say? Ready for a real adventure?" As the chamber filled with excited discussion from both species, Steven realized that the Dominion's greatest discovery wasn't Earth's location or humanity's capabilities. It was the simple truth that the universe becomes more extraordinary when explored through different eyes.